We've made our sky into a gallery hung with mythological paintings. It's every gallery's dream that after dusting it off and taking a closer look, a painting in their collection will turn out to be an old masterpiece, perhaps centuries older than they previously thought. In the same way, there's a great fascination in suddenly realizing that some of the constellation paintings hung in the celestial vault may belong to an older culture than we previously realized. One of the best known, brightest and most recognizable constellations is Orion. He's easily seen first by the three bright stars of his belt, and the rest of him appears before the eyes. His wide striding legs, the arm raised above his head holding a club, and the other arm raised in front of him as a counterbalance. He rides high in the winter night skies in the northern hemisphere. We think we already know his story. He's Orion the Hunter, a great brutish giant with an unsophisticated weapon, a knobbly club. He forever chases the flock of doves, the Pleiades, across the sky. According to Greek myth, these doves were originally maidens, but they were transformed into birds by Zeus to help them escape from Orion. And there was a further transformation as the flock of doves was placed in the stars, with Orion continually pursuing them. By the logic of that story, Orion was already a club-wielding giant before he chased these doves, but tradition also records that he was a hunter, and that he continued to hunt in the afterlife. And so, since he is chasing the flock of doves, it would make sense if the stick he holds is in fact the type of throwing stick which humans have used for thousands of years when trying to catch birds. Could it be that the image is far older than the Greek myth, and that they simply invented the story to go with it? The earliest appearance of Orion in European literature is in the oldest example of such literature, the works of Homer. In the Odyssey, Orion crops up as a constellation, and then there is also in Book 11 a reference to him as a giant figure hunting with a great bronze club in a field of tall flowers in the afterlife, during the episode where Odysseus visits the land of the dead. I saw huge Orion in a meadow full of asphodel, driving the ghosts of the wild beasts that he had killed on the mountains, and he had a great bronze club in his hand, unbreakable for ever and ever. Asphodel is a tall flower of the lily family, and so the image starts to seem strongly reminiscent of a stock Egyptian afterlife image known from many tombs across a wide period, showing a stick-throwing figure hunting in a field of tall reeds and lotus flowers. Indeed, these images show a figure hunting birds with a throwing stick. Shown here first is an example from the tomb of Nakht from the 14th century BC, around 3,500 years ago, in the New Kingdom, not far distant from the time in which the events described in the Odyssey are supposed to have occurred. There are the tall plants like the field of asphodel, and there is a figure whose posture is exactly that of Orion. It's been noted that it's odd that Nakht is shown in this pursuit. As an official residing in Upper Egypt, he wouldn't have possessed lands in the region of the papyrus marshes of Lower Egypt, and this is not a pursuit he would have been involved with in his normal life. This suggests the scene has some other significance. This is an illustration of another example from the New Kingdom, from the tomb of Mena. Figures accompanying the hunter hold bunches of lotus flowers they've picked from the waters. This same scene is also found on a gold shrine that was part of the tomb treasures of Tutankhamun, and in reversed form it's found in the New Kingdom tomb of Nebamun. This image had already been in use for a long time when used in these New Kingdom tombs. This example is from the double tomb of Meku and Sabni, in the time of Pepi II at the end of the Old Kingdom, around 1,000 years before the time of Nakht. The forearm on part of the throwing stick have crumbled off the fresco, but the original was clearly very much the same image as the images in the New Kingdom tombs, as is made even clearer if we add them back in. Did the Greek myth about the Orion constellation holding a stick and chasing a flock of doves, the Pleiades, develop from the Egyptian image of the deceased involved in the kingly pursuit of hunting with a throwing stick in the happy marshes of the afterlife? The more we look into it, the more the answer appears to be yes. As we've said, these images are at least as old as the Old Kingdom, the Pyramid Age, and from that time we have texts that give us a great deal of insight into what these images are all about. We know from the Pyramid text that there was a celestial field of reeds in the sky, and that the afterlife king Osiris travelled through this field in the form of the Orion constellation, and we even know that a bird-catching event took place in this heavenly marsh, in which the spirit double of the pharaoh would take part after he had ascended from the tomb. From utterance 432 in the pyramid chamber of Pharaoh Pepi, we learn that the deceased pharaoh is to be taken into the sky as a star. And from utterance 440 we know that Pepi's car, his spirit double, is to ascend into the sky. From 442 we know that Osiris, in the form of the Orion constellation, which is obviously of enormous relevance here, passes through a starry version of the field of reeds with the pharaoh's car. Lo, he has come as Orion. Lo, Osiris has come as Orion, lord of wine at the wag feast. Conceived of sky, born of dusk, sky conceived you and Orion, the dawnlight gave birth to you with Orion. You shall rise with Orion in the eastern sky, you shall set with Orion in the western sky. Sirius is your guide on the sky's good paths, in the field of rushes. It should be pointed out that the Wag Feast was a festival at the start of the inundation, and this was also when Orion was born in the dawnlight in the Pyramid Age, the heliacal reappearance of the constellation shortly before dawn, after a period of apparent absence in the sky. So we're probably looking here at an identification of the drowning Osiris with the flooding of the land, and of the ascension of his spirit with the rise of Orion. Egyptian kings were themselves identified with Osiris, the god was their archetypal model. In Utterance 517 we learn how Pepi's spirit will be ferried through the field of rushes to a field where the bird catch takes place. And here the deceased pharaoh assigns the revered ones to the bird catch, and he is also one who will himself be assigned to this bird catch. O boatman of the boatless just, ferryman of the field of rushes, ferry this Pepi to the field, the great god's beautiful throne, that he may do what is done with the revered. He commends them to the cars, he assigns them to the bird catch. Pepi is such a one. He will assign Pepi to the cars, he will assign Pepi to the bird catch. We hear more about this starry bird catch in Utterance 553. Raise thyself up, the double doors of heaven are open for thee. The double doors of the tomb are open for thee. The double doors of Nut, goddess of the starry sky, are open for thee. Greetings, says Isis. Ferry on in peace, says Nephthys, after she has seen their father, Osiris, on the day of catching birds with the throwing stick, when you ascend to heaven as a star. So the sister goddesses Isis and Nephthys see their father Osiris being ferried through the sky during a bird-catching event that involved a throwing stick at the time when the king ascended as a star. So what's not in doubt is that there was a celestial version of the bird catch taking place in the heavenly field of reeds located in the starry sky, and that it was in this form of Orion that Osiris travelled through this region. So when we see the bird catch in the field of reeds in the tombs, it's clearly more than a nice holiday snap to remind the deceased of an activity they'd enjoyed when alive. It was a depiction of an event which the car of the deceased would take part in when ascending from the tomb into the sky. That the images also look just like Orion with his raised club, and that Orion himself chased a flock of birds across the sky in Greek myth, should be enough already to kindle our curiosity. Was Orion the Hunter, who chased a flock of birds, originally an Egyptian constellation? Do the Egyptian images of the bird catch with the throwing stick in the field of reeds actually show Orion? One of the strongest bits of confirmation comes from the fact that the equivalence between the Greek myth and the Egyptian conception of the sky extends to include the Pleiades as part of the picture. Just as the Pleiades for the Greeks were the flock of doves chased by Orion, for the Egyptians this star cluster marked a part of the sky they called the flock. One of the ways the Egyptians divided up the sky was into 36 decans. Decans contain stars that rise and set rather than those nearer the pole that are always above the horizon. The Greek name decan comes from the fact that there was a period of 10 days before the next decan reached a fixed point in the sky at a certain time. The identity of some decans is uncertain, but the three that scholars are now most agreed about are the ones containing Sirius, Orion and the Pleiades. Decans could be used for telling the time during the night. Indeed, the scribe Nacht, whose tomb, as we've seen, contained a bird-catch scene, is thought, due to his titles, to have been a royal astronomer and counter of the hours during the night. As such, he would have known how Orion followed the flock. We should also note that the decan figures were shown standing in reed boats, just as with the image of the bird hunter. When the Egyptians spoke of the decan of the flock, was this in the sense of a flock of birds? Certainly the terminology could be used in that sense, as in a section of the coffin text that actually again describes the use of the throwing stick in the celestial marshes of the afterlife. For this theme from the pyramid text was later taken up by these coffin texts. Horus, having revived and attended to the needs of Osiris, his father, then gives him the power of movement, saying to Osiris, "May you find the valleys full of water for your washings in the cool water. May you pluck papyrus plants, rushes, lotuses and lotus buds. There shall come to you waterfowl in thousands lying on your path. You cast your throw stick at them. They are thousands, failed by the sound of its wind. Grey-lag geese and green-breasted geese, white-fronted ducks and pin-tailed drakes. In this passage from spell 62 of the coffin texts, the number of birds is twice given as thousands, and I can show you the relevant section here in the hieroglyphs, including the hieroglyph for thousands. The hieroglyphic numeral for 1,000 is an image of a lotus or a water lily. This could be used multiplied to form a word that could mean flock, as with the name for one of the decans. The name of the decan in question was written like this, i.e. 3 lotuses and a star, and the name meant the star of the flock or the star of the myriad. This identification of the part of the sky around the Pleiades with the flock, eternally followed by Orion, must surely have fed into the idea of Osiris in the form of Orion hunting thousands of birds with a throwing stick. In most of the bird hunter images, the hunter's female consort is shown standing behind them in the reed boat, as we can see here. In the case of Osiris, the archetype of the Egyptian king, the consort is Isis, who is identified with Sirius. Sirius follows closely behind Orion in the sky. And in the image here we see a female figure representing the decan containing Sirius, following behind the male figure representing the decans containing Orion. Therefore it seems highly likely that the consort behind the bird hunter in the tomb images represents Sirius in the same way that the hunter represents Orion. In the Egyptian images of the bird hunter in the marshes, a river is always depicted below the feet of the hunter, filled with river animals. This is interesting because in our star map it's in the location of the constellation the ancients called the river, which was associated with the Nile. Eratosthenes wrote, "The river has its source at the left foot of Orion," and he says that while Aratus calls it Eridanus for no clear reason, others say it's most appropriately identified with the Nile. From here we can note the 2 large fish invariably shown hanging from a harpoon and held above the river to the right of the bird hunter. The Pisces constellation to the right of Orion consists of 2 fishes. In fact, the 2 fishes of Pisces are tied together by a cord, and a logical explanation for this is that they've been caught and then strung up together to dry, as has been done by people in many cultures, including Egypt. It's depicted in the very fresco we've looked at as part of the offering to the enthroned Kas of Nakht and his wife. Pisces, as the 2 caught fishes, connects well to the 2 fishes carried on the harpoon, and this also puts Cetus, the water monster, in the Nile River, so you could imagine how the hippo became a river monster when translated to cultures that had no hippos, such as Babylonian or Greek. But we need to be careful. If we get carried away including as many constellations as possible, we may end up on a wild goose chase. So let's return to our core theme, namely, well, the celestial wild goose chase. Close to the Pleiades are the Hyades, and Greek myth connects these 2 groups of nymphs by saying they were sisters. The Hyades may have the better claim to be the original flock, as the stars form a V-shape, exactly the shape of the formation which waterfowl adopt when flying in groups. The V points away from Orion as if they're fleeing from him. The original inherent logic of the scene suddenly becomes apparent. As such, it's the type of hunter's star story we find in old indigenous hunter-gatherer societies, when hunting in this way was a mainstay of food provision and most stories were about hunting. My guess is this original story is from a pre-dynastic, even a pre-agricultural star myth. So that familiar painting in the celestial vault is a good 1.5 millennium older than we realised. It goes back to the age of the Egyptian pyramids at least, and maybe far older, and it doesn't show a brutish giant in the gloomy Greek underworld of the uninitiated, but rather the car of Osiris abundantly provided for in the field of reeds, a scene redolent of pharaonic mystery and spiritual optimism. It would be a simplification though to say that Osiris was identified with Orion. There are equally good arguments for the enthroned Osiris in the Hall of Judgment scenes, being the Cassiopeia constellation in the region of the celestial pole, to choose another example. Because for the hippo-crocodile goddess, bull's foreleg and the 4 sons of Horus in these scenes, we have explicit evidence for their being circumpolar constellations. We saw the same paradox in the pyramid text of Pepi. Pepi's ferried over to the place of his throne, where he assigns his own car to the bird catch. And we find the same thing in the Nakht tomb fresco. Nakht is enthroned watching his own car taking part in the bird catch and also harpooning fish. This isn't a different Osiris, it's the same one. How can this be? Such constellation forms were really ways to uplift the car by means of increased resonance. The constellation images are ideas imprinted with generations of wonder, in transpersonal morphic fields, and this richness of field is invigorating and uplifting. So if you plug the Platonic idea of the person, their car, into the constellation form by association, you'll invigorate them. In other words, you could think of them as being yoga poses for the car. A fresco or a statue could help the car to make use of such resonant images to create the association. But you can also do them as actual yoga poses today. Build them into your routine. Adopt the pose of the Egyptian Orion. Which means putting your legs in a striding position, facing west, with the feet parallel and facing forward. Imagining your yoga mat to be your reed boat, sailing over the marshes. Then twist your torso 90 degrees round so it faces to the side, while your head faces forward in the same direction as your feet. Such a posture not only imitates the poses of Egyptian figures, but also puts you in the twisted state of someone about to throw something. One arm is raised above and behind you, as if holding the throwing stick, while the other is raised in front of you as the counterbalance. Gaze forward into forever and feel the resonance with ancient tradition. Say to yourself, "My car stands strong like Orion forever and ever." I see the beauty of the good things in the place of abundance. The hunter-gatherer paradise of stability, balance, and sustainability. Then repeat, having swapped the positions of your two legs and two arms, and facing your torso to the other side.